And so welcome everybody. Public participation guidelines. Members of the public wishing to participate in the meeting must use their full name for Zoom access. If full names are not used, people will not be allowed to participate in discussion. The town reserved the right to remove any member of the public from the meeting who does not use a full name or acts inappropriately. As a preliminary matter, this is the October 19th meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust. I am Tucker Holland, the Housing Director. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brooke Moore.
Here.
Penny Dye.
Here.
Dave Iverson.
Here.
Rima Sherry.
Here.
Okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Allison Mitchell.
Here.
And Bogran.
Welcome to our newest staff. Before I say I'm here.
Excellent. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Andrew Mulcahy.
Here.
Mark Hess.
Here.
Kamal McCarthy.
Here.
Ann Cuspa.
Here.
Dave Arminetti. Dave? I think Dave is here. And Billy Cassidy.
Sorry about that, folks. It's Dave Arminetti. I was on mute for a second there.
No problem. Thanks,
Good
Dave.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I was spinning into oblivion, pardon me.
Okay, but you are here. And we'll also welcome, I see Mr. Dickler is attending. Good morning, or good afternoon, I will say. This open meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature some public comment. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair or vice chair notes otherwise. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair or vice chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, question, or motions. Please hold your comments until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For those items involving public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their name and be acknowledged by and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And I will turn that over to our esteemed chair, actually, who has just arrived.
Phew.
And it's all you, Brian.
Brian, do you want me to just do the first agenda item, which is approval of the agenda?
Sure.
Oh, there you are.
I just got in.
All right, I'm going to move approval of the agenda.
Second. From Remo.
You want to take the vote, Brian, or shall I?
Go ahead. I'm just trying to figure out
Okay.
how to get my camera to work.
Yeah, and I'm on a phone, so I have to do this. Okay, by roll call vote, Brian Sullivan,
Yes.
Dave Iverson,
Yes.
Penny Dye,
Aye.
Rima Sherry,
Aye.
and myself, I think that's it, right? Yep, because Allison's not a member anymore. Okay, so then minutes are delayed till next week. Next item on the agenda is public comment for items not otherwise on the agenda. Is there any public comment? And I can't see, so if you,
Penny has a comment.
okay, Penny?
Yeah, as usual, I have my hand up. I just want to wish today a very, very happy birthday to Ken Beaugrand from all of us.
Yay!
indeed.
Happy birthday,
Happy
Ken.
birthday, Ken.
Happy birthday,
birthday.
Ken.
Happy
All
birthday.
right,
I don't think he heard any
Okay.
of us.
thanks for that, Penny. Any other public comment?
Seeing none.
Go ahead, Brian, it's all you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks for opening. I am here. I don't know why my camera's not working, but I'll let you know if I go away, I guess. There's no closing cost assistance applications today, so we'll move down to item number 6, Covenant Formation Assistance Program. Looks like we want to kind of touch base on some additional allowable expenses or some expenses to be included in. Tucker, do you want to take this, or is this kind of coming from a request from Ann? Do we want to kick to her? How do you want to handle it?
Yeah, I'll just briefly introduce that Andrew and Ann had asked about allowable expenses under the formation program, and I'll let one of them describe specifically the item that has come up.
Hi, I'm Andrew Mulcahy from Housing Nantucket. Thanks, Tucker. Basically, someone who's in the process of getting the planning board approval has already gone through the process of getting a survey done and all of that stuff. But they basically approached Housing Nantucket asking if it would be possible to apply for CFAP funds to be used towards the creation of a IA septic system, basically in order to for the prospective covenant, for the future covenant owners to build a house with more bedrooms. Basically, they were told they had to upgrade their septic system, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000. I saw, looking at the CFAP application itself, it specifies that as we, permitting fees are allowable and surveying, and then it does say other costs, if I look at it, approved by Housing Nantucket, and I just didn't know, what latitude, or I just thought I'd bring that before you guys with the trust and see what your thoughts were on things that weren't specifically spelled out at this point in the application.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So I'll
Thanks.
look to trust members for comments or thoughts by show of hands. I can see everybody, but you can't see me. Kind of, Rima?
Well, I think that this is often a necessary expense to create a covenant lot. And I think we have a limit on, what we offer. And I think that this could be included, just to help them with that. Just in my opinion, it's I think it should be an allowable expense, and that, you know, within our parameters of how much we offer in assistance, you know, it wouldn't bother me if they used it to help pay for that.
Andrew, question for you in this scenario. Are they creating a new septic system exclusively for the covenant lot, or are they increasing the size of an existing system and designating a certain number of bedrooms to the covenant lot?
My understanding is that they're creating a new system that will help so that it can accommodate the new lot, and that it's a family situation, but that the market rate owners would cover like 2/3 of it. They do it based on the breakdown of how many bedrooms are in each dwelling, so that this future covenant owner would bear, you know, 1/3 the cost approximately of the septic system, and they understand it as a 0% loan with an 18-month term on it.
Dave, I saw your hand go up.
No, I think Rima covered what I had to say.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Brooke?
I agree. I mean, I think certainly, I mean, we could distinguish between septic design and septic installation costs. But if these folks have already, you know, invested in the design piece, it's all the same. It's stuff that needs to get done to create a covenant lot, and that's the purpose of the program. So I agree that it should be allowable.
So I guess, are we having a question about this holistically at a high level, or specifically to this instance? Because do we have an application from this group in front of us, or did we already, Andrew?
No, there is no application. They were wondering if they were to apply now, if that's something
That will be covered.
Mhm.
So in the high level conversation, I think if we're talking about waste disposal systems, we should also be including talking about sewer connections. So we're including both septic and sewer as part of that. I think there needs to be a specific agreement in this situation is great because it's a family all living on the same property and kind of designate them separately. But as we move forward into the future, I have concerns about shared septic systems and how the bedrooms are designated and how that is memorialized in deed or title, so it doesn't get confusing that it was only no 1 bedroom, no 3 bedrooms, no 2 bedrooms. So I think that's important. Rima?
Doesn't the select board have a policy about sewer hookups for affordable or covenant lots? I think they either get a discount or the charges are waived. Andrew, you're through the chair, you probably can answer that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think there have been a few people. I think if you can petition the select board to waive the connection and/or sewer privilege fee. So there have been cases of that, of people approaching the select board about that. I'm sorry, Anne, I think that's something.
But
No,
there
that's
is,
true, but this is a septic, so it's a little different because.
and even if the town's waiving those privilege fees, you still have engineering expenses to get a permit expenses, and actual structural. So the cost net same for disposal systems, I would think, at some level. Brooke?
Yeah, I agree. I would imagine there's, you know, there has to be design work that goes into where the septic hookup, I mean, the sewer hookup, if it's connecting to town, is going, and there's an initial permitting fee as well that I would assume we've already included because we cover permitting fees. But I think, Brian, your point is a good one, that to ensure that the covenant home is protected, has protected access to a shared septic, should it ever be no longer within the same family. But and how that, I'm not sure how that happens anyway on any kind of subdivision where it's a shared septic or, you know, that kind of thing. So I think it's a good thing to work out, but I have no problem covering it for this with maybe finding out how to codify it in language in our application for future applicants.
Penny?
Yeah, I was
Thank
just
you,
gonna say, I'm dealing with a situation like that right now, and there's an agreement in place that goes on record between the two owners in terms of use and future change of use.
And I think that would need to come in at the time of the application. If we were giving out the money, that would need to review that agreement.
Yeah, I also agree that this is a relevant cost to creating ownership opportunities, so.
And
When you create a secondary lot, the primary and the secondary lots can share the well and septic, but the Department of Environmental Protection needs to approve it. And also, like Penny mentioned, there needs to be a shared septic agreement put in place.
great, thank you, Ann. And Tucker?
So I just was going to say that we have a fairly full agenda here. So if we could maybe take up the specific matter and we could have a more holistic discussion.
Yeah,
at
so
another point.
you were leading right to where I was. So Andrew, I think the question based on the applicant is yes, submit the application. And under the other our review, it seems like we'll be willing to take that up, and moving forward, we'll look to staff to create a policy related to waste disposal systems and fees.
Okay, great, thanks.
With that, we'll move to, let's see. Are we, welcome Allison, woohoo. I may have already missed some of that when I wasn't on, but an official, Allison, we are sad to see you leave one role, but we were really excited to see you transition into the housing and real estate office manager. Thank you for your willingness to sit with Ken and Tucker all day.
Thank you. I'm very, very excited. And little Eleanor is as well, which is why my camera is off.
And nobody can be as excited as Tucker and I.
Right. And the beauty is she doesn't have to sit right next to us all day.
Awesome. Awesome. With that, we'll move to item number 8, an update on projects. We have Wiggles Way first. I just wanted to start with that because it's fun to say. Anne, do you want to lead that? And I see the developers on to support you if need be.
Sure thing. So Ann Cuspa, Housing Nantucket, and things are moving right along with the project. So we're really excited about that. We went through all 8 buildings the designs have been approved by HDC. So we are very grateful to HDC for all the time that they put in for reviewing that. And we've come to a good place with that. So right now, those approved designs are with the modular company who is drawing out the plans. Then they go to a third-party engineer architecture firm who will approve those plans. And then after that, they go to the state to get approval as well. So that's all in the works. We anticipate pulling building permits. All 22 building permits will be pulled before December 15th. 2021. I know that's a significant milestone for the SHI list, so that is definitely in our mind as well, and we are on track for that. We expect the first boxes. Last time I was here, we were saying November. Well, it's pushed back a bit to early January at this point, but it doesn't push back when we think that people will actually be occupying the units, which is July of 2022. That's when the first units will be available, and then kind of phased availability through August of 2022, and then finishing up the landscape and buttoning everything up over there in the fall. So that is the update with Wiggles Way.
Awesome. Thank you, Ann. Does anybody on the board have any questions for Ann or Billy while they're here? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, the Wildflower Acceleration. Dave, give you the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members, staff. Thanks for the invitation to give you an update. We are similarly to Ann and Billy and their group proceeding fast and efficiently as we can with Meadows 2 Phase 2A, our 3 buildings and 24 units that the board is very familiar with. We are still seeing some backups and delays with the third-party review at the BBRS at the state level, not so much at the third-party reviewer level, but we are expecting our BBRS number on our first 8-unit building any day now, as of the call that we had yesterday with our team. And that first 8-unit building is scheduled to go online at Signature Building Systems on November 8th, be offline in about 15 work days, which will be the 1st of December, and we'll be on island New Year's, January 3rd or 4th. So the next 2 buildings should follow very closely behind in about a 30-day queue right after that. The BBRS review really is getting strung out, but it's not holding up our second and third buildings really in terms of getting our spot on the fabrication line, which is really the most critical deadline in terms of delivering the buildings. So all that is progressing. We still expect to have occupancy of the first building, by about early March, the second building by mid-April, and then the last building, which is the last 6 units, by May 15th, call it Memorial Day if we want to round out a little bit. So we should be 100% complete by that time. We have all the market rate units, of which there are 12 already committed, and plenty of preliminary interest for the AMI units, and we will commence with the formal outreach and lottery process there with SEB consultants shortly. The site work, Cooney is out there now, CC Construction, finishing up the little tweaks to the utilities that we had to complete. And in order to expedite things and make sure that we are ready, we have had discussions with the Plus Department, with Andrew and Leslie, and with Paul Murphy and that whole team about expediting foundation-only permits, just so we don't get caught in terms of time frame with the cold weather. The cold weather happens to come in early in late November and early December for our foundations. So we're managing all that. Everyone is working towards the same goal as you might expect, which is to get these done as quickly as possible. In terms of financing, we have drawn down our last money, the financing with the trust. We are poised to sign our loan docs and close our construction mini-perm loan with Eastern Bank. At the kind of the last moment, they asked for some assents actually from the town related to the mortgage and the transfer of the property into our development entity. So Tucker and Ken and Vicky Marsh are working on that. It's just a couple of pages of paperwork. And as soon as we get that, we will close, which we expect to happen in certainly the next 7 to 10 days. So full speed ahead, still managing the approval process. Fortunately for us, SBS Signature Building Systems has pre-purchased enough in the way of critical construction materials where we're not getting caught up in the supply chain problem that is really starting to become an issue with delivering even the simplest kind of product. I'm sure the board and staff have heard horror stories that, even things as simple as you might not expect, such as joint compound, are now being problematic because joint compound has resins in it, and resins are even being delayed in the market and being purchased up by other nations. So it's really becoming a problem, but we're fortunate enough that we've got pre-purchase rights through SBS that they've guaranteed to us. So we're not getting caught in that quagmire, at least not yet. So all good news to report. We'll keep the board and the staff posted, and we appreciate everybody's continued guidance and continued support. And I also should take a quick moment to welcome Allison to the other side of the team. And I would second the chair's motion that Tucker and Ken can certainly use some guidance over there and get reined in a little bit. So good luck, Allison.
That's enough from you, Dave. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dave. Never enough, but thank you very much for the update. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Tacoma
to.
Green.
We have Mark Hess with us. Yep.
Hi, Mark. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but Tucker had mentioned that it might be helpful just to give an update of where we are in the process and sort of our best case timing in terms of getting to construction start on Tacoma Green. And if there are other areas that would be helpful, I'm happy to dig into whatever level of detail might be helpful. Does that make sense?
That sounds great.
Okay, great. You know, as you know, we're in a bit sort of uncharted waters here in terms of construction pricing, which has been difficult for us. We submitted a one-stop application with pricing that we'd secured at the end of 2020. And shortly after application went in, we got notice from the two bidders on the contractor that we were busted by a pretty large number in terms of what they could get the project done. We worked with the town and to try to solve that problem and create possibility of additional financing to solve some of those construction items. In part through I think it's about $6.5 million or a portion of a $7 million and change funding that is discussed as a potential gap source to get Tacoma started. So where we are right now is we're still working with the two same contractors. The updated pricing that we have still does not work. You know, a lot of things have continued to move where the wood has not come down and the metal and electronics have gone up to raise a bunch of other challenges for the projects. What we do have is we know the number that works within the limitations of the financing that's available. And typically we like to cast a large net and get the most competitive pricing that we can. Everyone's so busy that you can't get anyone's attention to kind of put the real work in that's required to solve problems. So we are trying right now to finalize an agreement with one of the bidders, basically on a construction management basis, to proceed to try to make the project come together so that we can get started and closed by June of 2022. So we still have a gap to close, and we don't have answers to all the problems that are out there. But we've got a real reputable team. We are in a striking distance, and we're hoping that over the next 90 days, some of the issues that we're seeing continue to simmer down and help us to kind of get us back into where we were in the spring of 2021, pricing wise. So that's the current arc. We have all the financing awarded from DHCD and all the commitments. They are conditional and they require us to have closed in June of 2022. So that is the target. And although it's difficult and sometimes frustrating, it has all of our focus at this time to try to solve those problems so that we can get to a closing. We have a financial team. We're really excited about an equity and debt relationship that has a presence and an interest in the island. And you know, all the other items look really strong in terms of the project. And obviously the demand is there and the support is there, which we really appreciated. So it's really down to getting the construction number back into a less unreasonable range. I won't say reasonable, but less unreasonable range, so that we can get in the ground and fulfill our commitments to the town. So that's so the way is we don't have all the answers, but we are targeting a June closing right now if we can solve the construction number issue.
Looking for questions from the board. I see Brooke.
Hey, Mark, thank you. If we look at June as a closing, what's the timeline then for construction and occupancy?
Well, we are, we've been going back and forth between stick and modular in terms of how we can impact the timing. Modular has a significant pricing advantage, but the height limitations, we have a 30-foot height limitation on that site based on the zoning and the historic approvals. And it's really difficult to get a reasonable finished ceiling height for a building that size with a 30-foot limitation. So we've gone back and forth about converting. Between those challenges and the difficulties of these factories being extremely busy, and the need to commit to one factory where, if they go sideways, then you're kind of a little bit in a ditch. We're really trying to push the current plan to go panelized. And so it's a longer construction process. There's more bodies involved. You're more exposed to the weather and the transportation limitations and things of that nature. We will know more when they come back and they get the feedback from the subs that they choose. But our pro forma right now is a 14-month period projected for delivering the first building. So 14 to 18 months completion window is what we currently have projected. And we would expect, of course, we haven't projected like an instant lease up in terms of supporting the numbers, but we would expect that the absorption of those units to go very quickly based on the demand in the marketplace. So I think we've got a projected 12-month absorption period, but it's because we would start an early lottery process and we start that as we started phasing the buildings, it's entirely possible that we could be fully occupied 3 or 4 months after completion. Hoping and betting on that level of success are two different things from the financing perspective, but that's the range, I would say, within 4 to 12 months of completion.
Okay, thank you.
The board, any other questions for Mark? Seeing none, on behalf of the board, I'll say, Mark, thank you for the time today and joining us. Tucker, any closing statement or?
No, I appreciate everybody being here from these various projects. I think in particular with regard to the board's thinking about budget for next year and planning, it was helpful to have Mark's input on where they're at with that project today.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you for your patience. And I know it's been quiet, but we have our hip to the grindstone over here. So we continue to push.
Great.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for the update, Mark.
Thanks all.
Moving down the agenda to item 9, we have a presentation from the Director of Diversity and Equity and Inclusion, Kamal McCarthy. Thank you for joining us today, Kamal. Appreciate having you here and welcome to the position, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. And Tucker, thanks very much for the invite. I appreciate this. I do have a lot to say, and I know I only have like 20 minutes, so I ask you to bear with me. I'm going to share my screen while I talk, by the way, too. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Just a moment. So I'm here to give a quick talk about the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Tucker, you're the only person I can see right now. So if I'm going extremely fast, please slow me down. You already know that I have a tendency to go fast. But the whole point of this presentation, and again, the reason why Tucker wanted to invite me here, was to just have a conversation with the board, with the committee, about just what I've learned so far about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've given a couple of presentations to at least a dozen organizations on the island about just what the office is all about and what are some of the responsibilities. But this presentation does a bit more of a deep dive into the principles of DEI. So for our agenda today, I'm going to review some learning objectives real quickly, as well as some definitions real quickly. And then I'm going to dive into the principles of diversity, and I will stop for one specific comment If anyone has a question, I'm just going to ask that you put that in the chat box at the end of that principle, just so again, as a time-saving matter, we can discuss the questions at the very end. I do know that you have a very full agenda, so I don't want to take up too much time. And at the end of the principles of equity, again, I will stop for a comment. If you have questions, just put that in the chat. I'll review 3 principles for the inclusion. We will talk about the principles in practice here in Nantucket. I'll go over some takeaways, and then if there is time at the very end, we'll have some question and answers. As for the learning objectives, I really want this presentation to help not only this audience right now, but the town in general to have a better understanding of the comprehension of the DEI director position. There are specifically 3 basic principles for each terminology that I will be sharing with us today, and I will recap them at the end of the presentation. And the idea really is for us to reach shared understanding on what this position and the terminologies are all about, for us to get the idea that, to start the dialogue along the lines of courageous conversations, as well as just hear from the audience and what some ideas for next steps will be. So I've gone over definitions of what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean multiple times already. So for those of you that have already heard this, I apologize, but diversity means any dimension that can be used to differentiate groups and people from one another. It means respect for and appreciation of our differences. Whereas equity means consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities that have been denied such treatment. Whereas equity means a state of being valued, respected, and supported. It's about focusing on the needs of every individual and ensuring that the right conditions are in place for each person to achieve his or her full potential. And these definitions were provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, as well as some recent White House executive orders. I have gone over these definitions a couple of times, and it seems that people really like the simplified version because the last slide had a lot of words on it. And so the best way to think about DEI is that diversity is where everyone is invited to the party. Equity means that everyone gets to contribute to the playlist, and inclusion means that everyone has the opportunity to dance. So for each of the principles that I'm about to go over, I put a quote just to help us to better understand what each principle means. And so our dear Lord says that it is not our differences that divide us, but it is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And again, before I jump into these terminologies more in depth, I want everyone to know that this is what I have come to understand about these terminologies since being in this position. And one of the first things I've come to realize about diversity is that diversity involves, the first principle rather, involves both the community and the individual. So every community has multi-layered cultural characteristics. Nantucket's composition, its rhythm of life, the Nantucket factor I've recently heard, are all unique to this island. And on the other hand, an individual's belief, their cultural lens, and their identities will all impact their opinion and interaction with diversity work. So to decrease biases and blind spots, we need to have keen self-awareness on one's identity, our values, and our perceptions in relationship to the community where we live. I like to think of this first principle as a yin and yang principle. You can't really have one without the other. The second principle of diversity that I'd like to share is that diversity is both valued and managed in the workplace. And to value diversity in the workplace, that is achieved through awareness, education, as well as recognition of our experiences that makes an individual unique. Whereas to manage diversity is to establish the processes that demonstrate care for and utilization of the benefits that diversity brings, which also aligns with an organization's goal. The third principle is that diversity itself as an element is an untapped resource. So workplace diversity is an untapped resource that can enhance an organization's economic performance and competitiveness. Throughout this presentation, you'll see slides, charts, as well as just some images to better visualize some of the things that I'm talking about. So an example of an untapped resource is simply just a lack of women in leadership. And you can see the chart on the right just demonstrates the Fortune 500 CEOs grouped by gender from the year 2000 to current times. And the whole point of why I wanted to show this really is not necessarily to say that there's anything wrong. It's just to highlight the fact that some organizations could be missing out on their opportunities and competitiveness by not investing more in women leadership. So the usefulness of the diversity principle that I would like us all to consider is, how can I, for us to ask ourselves rather, is how can I contribute or be an ally for or embody the ethos of diversity in this space? So that could be this physical space that we're now in this virtual setting, or even just the space of a supermarket. If a situation would occur, how can you add to that diversity? I'm going to stop right here really quickly to see if there's anyone with a comment. Seeing no hands raised, I'm going to continue moving on and bring it back down to Justine Only Tucker. The second principle is the principles of equity. So he who seeks equity must do equity is a quote by former Supreme Court Justice in Massachusetts born Joseph Story. And he's talking about equity in the legal context, but I think the quote very much applies to the DEI context as well. The one thing that I think I would like us all to take away about equity, because I feel like we've heard the term equity a lot in the news in multiple different settings. The one thing that I've come to learn is that there are multiple types of equity. There is social equity, which is what myself, Tucker, and anyone who works at the town really focuses on. In public administration, social equity refers to the policy formation, implementation, public management practices, the provisions of goods and services, and the administrator-resident relationships and interactions that ultimately reduce and eliminate disparity, marginalization, and discrimination. Whereas racial equity more specifically focuses on the fact that race was used as a social construction on how benefits were unjustly distributed based on a person's skin color, heritage, as well as their ethnicity and or national origin, which is completely different from employment equity, which is about using hiring practices and policies to encourage fair representation of people of minority groups, women, and other people that have suffered discrimination. I'm going to stop really quickly just to say that the terminology employment equity is mostly used in Canada and South Africa. And I think the equivalent would be the EEOC or Equal Employment Opportunity Commission here in the United States. Just to continue on this really quickly, other types of equity include representation equity. I'm not going to go over sweat equity or representation equity because I think we're both familiar with both of those. And here's a list of just other types of equity. You have educational equity, equity in finance, gender equity, housing equity, and so forth. Now, what is the usefulness of this principle in particular? I think the usefulness that we can all ask ourselves is the next time someone tells you that they are an equity officer, just based on going over this principle really quickly, we can now ask ourselves, or one of your first thoughts should be for that individual, what type of equity is your specialty? Again, I know that I only have 20 minutes. I won't take up too much of your time, but I also want us to know that equity is practiced. There are 3 stages to advance equity, which includes planning. So that's creating commitment and being the administrator for the planning process, the community engagement, as well as to establish network of stakeholders. That's how we practice equity. And then the third principle, as this image on the right shows, is that equity is not equality. And I think it's important for us to know that there is a difference between the two. Equality means that every individual or group of people is given the same resources or opportunity, whereas equity is to recognize that each person has different circumstances and that it's our responsibility to allocate the extra resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. Again, I just want to take a quick break to give our eyes a visual break from all the words and see a visualization of what I've been talking about so far. So you have these 4 different panels almost of inequality, equality, equity, and justice. I'm just going to give us 10 seconds to look at this for ourselves and just give myself a moment to catch my breath. All right, moving on. Hopefully this visualization has helped you to have a better understanding of what I've been talking about thus far. Let's review some principles for inclusion. So inclusion is not a matter of political correctness. It is key to growth. And that was said by Jesse Jackson. Inclusion is really about a culture of belonging. Now, some of the research that I've come across have argued that inclusion and belonging are separate things, but the majority of research that I have reviewed have basically said that inclusion is more specifically about understanding this culture of belonging. And we build a culture of belonging at work specifically when we see that we are seen rather for our unique contributions, connected to our coworkers, supported in our daily work and career development, and we are proud of our organizations and the values proud of its organizations. One thing that the second principle is that integration it's a matter, inclusion is beyond numbers. It's a matter of actually integrating each individuals into the actual processes. one thing that I've kept hearing over and over again when I got this position was that if 10% of the population is of the Latinx demographic, then perhaps 10% of the employment should be Latinx as well too. And inclusion goes beyond that. It moves beyond the simplistic notion of just increasing number counts of minorities towards actually substantial integration into policymaking and decision-making roles. Over the summer, I ran a book discussion on micro-messaging. And I think this was, because of that, I realized that inclusion also is an awareness of the micro-messages that we send to each other. So micro-messages are how humans communicate, to make a very long story short. And at work, micro-messages can tell us how much we are valued or respected by those that control our destiny. And so that is why I wanted to include this as the third principle of inclusion. Here is just a quick chart that actually measures inclusion. I like people to know that some of these theoretical things that I am here and I talk about can actually be quantified as well. So these are just the results of a survey of college-educated professionals that were conducted in May of 2020 that shows that white men and women have the highest median of belonging scores compared to those of other races and ethnicities. And this was produced by the, I found this article on this chart here on the Harvard Business Review website that I reviewed recently. So let's recap. This slide means that I'm almost done. So thank you everyone for your time so far. So the principles of diversity that I've been able to discuss today was that diversity, the first principle is that it involves both the community and the individual. Diversity is both valued and managed, and diversity itself is an untapped resource. As for equity, there are multiple types of equity, whether that be social equity, employment equity, and so forth. Equity is something that we practice. We can put it into just the things that we do, and equity is not equality. And then thirdly, inclusion is that we should all understand that it's about a culture of belonging. It is beyond time for us to move beyond this idea of just the numbers towards integration. And inclusion also means that we are aware of the micro messages that we send in our workplace and daily lives. So how is the town of Nantucket practicing the principles of DEI that we've just gone over? By simply establishing a DEI office and having a DEI director. The DEI strategic plan, which is underway and just recently started, by acknowledging Indigenous Peoples Day, Juneteenth, and the recent initiative, according to Amy, which looks at Nantucket's diverse history through a DEI lens using Janessa's book. The Meet Neat initiative, I just finished working on my second one, which is going to tell us about an employee that works at the Natural Resources Department. By doing collaborations with Nantucket Equity Advocates, the Civic League, and the Department of Culture and Tourism, by being in associations with the Massachusetts DEI Coalition and others as well, and just embracing the community's social assets, our adaptability, the multiculturalism, and our open-mindedness. Takeaways that I would like us all to consider is that the DEI are different terminologies, and hopefully that has been made clear today. DEI is practice and it is an ongoing process. There are no quick fixes to social issues, which are likely to change with time. I don't remember, oh, I do remember what I mean by that. So the social issues that we face today are not necessarily going to be the social issues that we face tomorrow. So there are no quick fixes to the social issues just in general, but having courageous conversations is going to help us to find solutions. DEI work is collaborative and it is also uncomfortable, but it is that uncomfortableness that is necessary. I think it is important for all of us to remember that mistakes are inevitable in courageous conversations. When talking about race, gender, sexual orientations, and so forth, mistakes are going to happen and we need to allow ourselves room to make mistakes so that we can grow from those mistakes. As well as it's just important to grasp like important concepts such as culture, identity, oppression, privilege, and so forth. And quite frankly, the trajectory of DEI professionalization, it is unknown, but in my opinion, I think it is bright. This is my question and answer slide. Feel free to we can just stop here. But the way that this usually works, or the way I was planning for it to work, if there is enough time, is that you will have to answer one of these questions that is proposed to you before asking me one. We don't have to do that, but here are some of the questions that are at least likely to consider. Could you describe 2 things that you learned from today's presentation? Which principle stood out as the most important for you? Which principle do you want more information on? Does this presentation enhance your understanding of DEI? Why or why not? And how can this presentation be improved? I won't leave those up, but given that I'm a graduate student, I do want to show my reference slide so to know that I didn't just come out of this with thin air. And then lastly, this is some information for those of you who won't be able to make your comment or question. This is how you reach me. Feel free to stop by the office or visit the DEI webpage on the town website. Again, thanks for having me. Much appreciated. Any questions?
Sorry, I was talking with my mute on. Kamal, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much for the efficiency, and it was awesome. I love your slides. Opening up to the group, I see Brooke's hand is up, or was that a clap? I don't know how to read these.
That was me applauding.
Okay, there we go. Any questions for Kamal? Rima?
Well, what sorts of things do you see us as the Housing Trust doing to, make a difference in diversity, equity, and integration?
That's a good question. I recently attended a housing symposium almost. I think Brooke was the one who actually gave me the link to participate in that. And to make a long story short, I know that in the recent Community Foundation for Nantucket meeting, it was addressed that housing is one of the island's biggest issues, and that won't be solved overnight. So I think just having conversations about just like how equity in housing specifically may be something that this body could be look into doing in the future, or just again having conversations, or even just documenting, which I believe I was a part of something that this body did recently about just hearing people's personal story on the importance of housing. Just documenting those stories and sharing them with others as well too is something that you've already been doing, and I would encourage that continues.
Great, thank you.
Kamal, are the slides something that we can enter into the record and have so people can look at them? I love the giving tree slide and the visual and the differences in how I didn't understand the differences in those terms. And so I really appreciate what you put together.
Thank you. Yes, for all presentations that I've been doing, any committee, I forward a Microsoft version of the slides to Tucker or the administrator. So I will certainly do that.
Great. Thank you. Any more questions? Brooke?
So I think in answer to Rima's question, I think when I think about this in this work, for us holding place in the units that we create for folks with disabilities, for older people, for people from different communities and different needs, and that we are keeping them in mind as we put together requests for proposals for future developments, to make sure that we're creating a diverse access point to housing for different parts of our community. So.
If there are no more questions, I'm just going to say thanks again to the committee for having me. You guys are technically the guinea pig for this presentation. And outside of my coworkers that are like almost required to be nice to me or tell me what to change immediately. So I very much appreciate you allowing me to present here. I will be doing this exact presentation for the cabinet at the end of this week. So this was a very good, useful opportunity for me as well too. So thanks for having me.
Got it. Thank you, Kamal.
Thank you, Kamal.
Moving on to the item number 10, we've got the HPP update. Tucker, can I toss to you for that?
Yeah, just briefly, as you all know, the HPP was submitted. Phil DiMartino, who is the individual at DHCD who reviews these, obviously received it. Initial indications are that everything looks good. I think he has actually a new person in his department, so he's giving them the opportunity to look at it in greater depth, and we anticipate that in the near future we will hear back favorably that has been approved. It doesn't, just as a matter of making sure that people understand, whenever they might approve our HPP, the relevant date is when we submitted our HPP. So we're in good shape.
Thank you, Tucker. Sorry, let's see. Moving on, was there any commentary or questions on the HPP update? Seeing no head shakes. Community Land Trust update. I'll come back to, we've got Tucker.
Yeah, just briefly, as you recall at the last meeting, a couple of members from this board had raised their hand about participating in a steering committee for this. And so Penny and Brooke joined several others last week, and we've kind of kicked things off. There are a number of different areas that need to obviously be addressed in the formulation of one of these. And so, over the course of the coming weeks, if not months, we will be, tackling those, and they include corporate and governance structure, relationship between the CLT and homeowner, and other areas. And along the way, I expect that the steering group would be reaching out to individuals on this board as well as others, for input into particular areas. So we are off and running.
Great. Thank you. CPC committee application update. I'm not sure where to take this one, but there were a number of members of the trust who listened and observed to the CPC meeting the other day. I think I can really throw it to maybe Ken. Are you?
Sure. The committee has held its deliberations and its vote, and the committee voted to approve an allocation of $350,000 to a new $5 million trust bond, and also a separate warrant article to, in fact, request the town to create and fund a new $5 million bond for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So the two key requests, or one key request, which resulted in two separate warrant articles, were approved and are in the process of being all the signatures gathered on it, so it can be filed by the November 15th date.
Great. Well, nice work to everybody involved, writing the application, the submission to CPC. Ken, thank you to your board for all the thoughtful consideration and reconsideration on getting that vote out the way that it did. So, now on to town meeting.
Correct. It's going to be a lot easier than the last meeting was.
We shall see. We don't know what's on it yet, but fingers crossed. 23 budget discussion.
Yes. So this is just a bit of a placeholder, and the intention is that we're going to get into it into greater depth next week. But just in terms of what we may be seeking for financial support for FY23, now that we know where the CPC vote has ended up. As you heard from Mark Hess, actually, we don't have actually a complete picture yet on what may be required for 6 Fairgrounds, but also another portion of our discussion for next week will center around our desire for moving 135 and 137 Orange Street forward in the nearer term. In addition, you're going to hear about an opportunity with regard to some land that Clifford Williams would like to discuss with the trust in serving year-round interests. And so, again, we can talk as much as we would like now, but it's intended to be a more fulsome discussion next week.
Hands up to kind of carry on items of the discussion now. Seeing none, we'll carry over. Let's see, other business, upcoming meetings.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
I just want to mention with next week's meeting, there is some good news from the standpoint that the transfer fee bill that would allow for a housing bank to be created is being taken up at the State House in committee, and that is the good news. The bad news is that it completely overlaps potentially with this meeting next week. So we plan to, forge ahead here. I just wanted to make you aware that Ken and I may need to duck out to testify real time, but we have Allison now, so we will carry on as planned.
Thank you very much for your willingness to head up and testify. Penny?
Yeah, just, I can't remember, why did we have the special meeting? Wasn't there something that wasn't done that we were going to take up then? Is it just the budget?
Well, we talked about in September, we've got a lot to cover, and we thought that one meeting would be it would take it'd be a very long meeting, and we decided to break it into two.
Because what's proposed is 3 in a row. Is it really necessary, or could we? I mean, I'm fine either way. I just need to understand why we're meeting, please.
Well, again, at the last meeting we discussed, you all had said let's have 2 in October because there is quite a bit. If you look, I can circulate the draft agenda. There is quite a bit on there. But I think at next week's meeting, we could make the determination whether we needed to meet the following week or just go for one meeting in November.
Right now I see what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Penny. Thanks, Tucker. So that kind of covers all of the upcoming meeting discussion because we'll review November 2nd at October 26th. Board comments? Brooke?
I'd just like to encourage the board members to think about folks who might serve well in Allison's position. It will go to nomination. It's an at-large position, so the select board will be nominating someone to take her seat. And in the spirit of Kamal's presentation, I'd love folks to encourage potential members who come from communities who are traditionally less represented in our town governance and decision making, and encouraging them to apply.
On that note, Tucker or Allison, whomever might have the answer, what is the timeline that the Board of Selectmen will be looking to appoint that seat?
I don't know exactly the timeline. I know that on the meeting this week is when my resignation will go to them, but I don't know about the timeline for reappointing them.
Okay, Penny?
Just, Sally, through you to everybody else, Allison's seat was a member at large?
Yes.
And a 1-year term or 2-year term?
I think it was 3, but I can.
Okay. Thank you.
Likely 2. We can
just a follow-up question. Are we then finding somebody to serve the balance of Allison's term? Thank you.
So Allison's term runs until next June. So I believe it would be filled until then, and then that person would be renominated if they chose to serve beyond that.
Thank you.
Great. Any more board comments? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion on executive session. Who's got it in front of them
I
to
can
read?
do it because it's
All right,
right,
thanks, Penny.
it's right in front of me. All right, I'll make a motion that we adjourn the regular meeting not to return for the purposes of going into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dave's, okay, I was gonna say Dave's eyes say second. Let me give it to Dave. By roll call, Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Penny Dye,
I
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan. Aye. Great. We'll see you in the other meeting.